Our namesake, Reverend A. Powell Davies, once preached that he was part of a faith community in order to be refreshed and comforted, not in a cheap or easy way, but by feeling once again that in the mystery of human life, with all its perils, pains, and fears, something answers the cry in our hearts. May we all find that comfort and connection here this morning. Today we've gathered in the midst of major, intersecting local and global crises, threats against democracy and democratic institutions, threats against families, efforts to limit whose rights matter, whose lives matter, whose inherent worth and dignity is respected. We gather fully aware of how today's challenges are rooted in history, how this moment is built upon a legacy of exploitation, of enslavement and forced labor, of conquest and theft. As we gather, we mourn the fact that this sanctuary and many of the places we call home are built on land that was stolen from the Piscataway people, who cared for these lands for generations before the colonizers arrived and who remain an integral part of our community. As we gather, we profess that this nation profited by and was built on stolen labor of enslaved people and the exploitation of immigrants. We honor these ancestors, some of us as their direct descendants, and all of us through our shared commitment to uphold their lives and their humanity. As we gather, we know that these crises and this history impacts all of us, but that it impacts each of us differently. And knowing all of this, we gather still, seeking to build a place and a community of belonging and transformation, a community of care and compassion, a community that seeks to be a force for justice and a safe harbor in this world, a community that seeks to radically welcome all. This morning, our time for joys and sorrows will also include our annual water communion ritual. Across the country and around the world, Unitarian Universalist congregations practice this ritual near the start of the congregational year. It symbolizes the many streams of our lives flowing together into one body of water, one community of interdependence and connection. In this congregation, we've begun to keep our communal water from year to year, representing our connection to those who have come before us and those who will come after us. That's the water here on the altar in the large jar. I've already poured some of that water into our communal bowl where it will flow together with all that we add to it today. So a little bit of logistics about how we're going to do this. We will first have an opportunity for those to wish to share aloud before adding their water to our communal bowl. This is a time to share your joys or sorrows or describe the water that you're bringing with you. After folks have shared aloud, we'll have an opportunity for those who wish to add water without speaking aloud. We'll have an opportunity for everybody to add water who wishes to and who wants to have a chance to do so. Now, those of you who've brought your water from your own life, from home or someplace else, you are welcome to add that water to our shared bowl. But if you did not bring water this morning, there are several vessels of water for you to choose from on the table. And you might choose to pour water that symbolizes most closely what is happening in your life. There are mason jars with water in them, each representing different ways we might be experiencing life now or have felt over the last year. One jar has salt water in it for the droughts in our lives, the sorrows and sadnesses, the times of scarcity, of feeling lost, the times when life feels it may be taking more from us than giving to us. Another jar has water with lemon in it for the currents in our lives, the zest of sweetness and sour for change and movement and new adventures. The third jar has honey in it for the lapping of waves, the sweetness of life, or the soothing of being held and carried for times when we are filled with gratitude and community and feel sustained. And the final has parsley in it for the storms of our lives, the hardships and challenges such as addiction, mental illness, or heartbreak and loss. You're invited to pour any water you want and just a little bit into the bowl, pouring whatever feels the most relevant to you and your experience, and then you can return to your seat. For our loved ones online, you too can participate either silently or by sharing aloud, and Christine or I will pour water on your behalf. Please do tell us what water you would like us to use, representing the storms or the sweetness and soothing of life, the currents of change, or the droughts and sorrows and sadness. And so now we'll begin with those who wish to share something aloud. When you do share aloud, please share your name, your pronouns if you wish, and then briefly share the joy or sorrow, and let us know what the water that you pour represents. There's a saying that you may know, one seeking to reassure us that faith can move mountains. You may know this from the Bible or from a bumper sticker or just because it's said everywhere. Lately, as the enormity of the challenges and injustices of the world presses in on me, I've been wrestling with that phrase. Maybe, like me, when you hear this phrase that faith can move mountains, you might think to yourself, if faith in God alone was sufficient to move mountains, then why does it seem that the mountains of injustice are getting bigger and more dangerous? You know, that's what I think to myself, and I know that I doubt that faith or belief in God, however that word God is understood, doesn't seem to be a sufficient response to times in history like this one. I know that I don't think we can leave it all to some external actor, whether it's a politician or a charismatic movement leader or even a divine being, and just trust that everything will be okay. Instead, as I personally understand the world and as I personally understand the power that I mean when I use the word God, our very human response is key. As I understand the power of God is that it is the invitation, the impulse, the desire for diversity and complexity and interdependence. It's the creative force that drives creativity and connection and compassion and, yes, activism for justice. When I think about what kind of faith it takes to move mountains, I don't think about belief or doctrine or dogma. I think about the kind of faith that calls us to action, the kind of faith in our own deep knowing of right and wrong, the kind of faith in our own power, the kind of faith that calls us into community even when, or especially when, the going gets tough. This is the kind of faith that I think can move mountains. I want to tell you a story. On August 11th, the president, with authoritarian and fascist impulses, federalized the DC Police Department and activated the DC National Guard to participate in law enforcement activities. Some of you live in DC, and many of you may know that I live in Washington, DC. What you might not know is that I live at the intersection of three neighborhoods, Adams Morgan, Mount Pleasant, and Columbia Heights, that have long been home to immigrants who fled persecution and violence around the world, often violence that had been stoked by the action or inaction of the United States government. These neighborhoods have been shaped and strengthened by strong communities with roots in Central and South America, in Southeast Asia, and the Horn of Africa, not to mention everywhere else around the world. Shortly after the president of the party that has traditionally championed local rights and limited government intervention, shortly after he took over our city's law enforcement, the mood in the neighborhoods changed. The tension on the streets was real, and for good reason. The block I live on is no stranger to helicopter flyovers, whether it's hospital transports on the way to the medical center or Marine One, or Vice President's helicopter flying to the White House or the Naval Observatory, or even the occasional run-of-the-mill police activity. But now the flyovers are different. They hover. They stay low to the ground and in a single place for 30, 45, 60 minutes at a time, rattling our windows with their drone that drowns out conversation and puts teeth on edge, notably during that time when we're already on edge trying to get our children out the door to go to school. Often after this period of hovering, the marked and unmarked cars begin to arrive, and identified and less than identified law enforcement officials emerge, often wearing masks to obscure their face. In recent weeks, they've abducted people by dragging them through the windows of cars and using other harsh and intentionally violent means. And they've menaced bystanders who are simply going about their business or who are there intentionally to witness and record what is happening. They've used threats of mace spray, of bodily violence, or even detention in an attempt to intimidate and silence anyone who they think might interfere with them. And this is when I tell you about the kind of faith that can move mountains. Since the first days of the federal takeover, and for some long before that day, the people who live in these neighborhoods have been organizing. They've been building neighbor-to-neighbor networks. They've been meeting in one another's houses and reminding or teaching themselves about their rights. They've been preparing themselves for taking the risk of witnessing and mobilizing themselves when their neighbors are threatened, or when their own families are threatened. And just the other week, when law enforcement and ICE swarmed the neighborhood after a nonviolent robbery and used that as an excuse to begin to enter apartment buildings and cast a dragnet to sweep up anyone they might want to deport, the people of the neighborhood began to gather on the streets, and they kept gathering, and they kept gathering, communicating using the networks that they had created. And as the crowd continued to grow, the officers returned to their cars and left the scene. Now, I can't say for sure that it was the presence of the neighborhood or the crowd that caused them to leave, but either way, I do think that the kind of faith illustrated by these neighbors is the kind of faith that can move mountains. This is the kind of faith that calls us into action and relationship, the kind of faith that calls us to keep the faith in and with one another, the kind of faith that takes a feeling and turns it into action. It's the kind of faith both in one another and in the community and in the power of our own being, of our own knowing of right and wrong. This faith may not move mountains overnight, but it is moving and running over the mountains, and it is eroding them and undermining that system which is intended to be overwhelming by force, and it's doing this by responding with the power of community coming together. This morning we brought our own community together, bringing water to represent our lives, and we combined them into one communal water. This year, as we reflect on this water, I want us to think about how it reflects our community, our bonds to one another, and the power and possibility of a community like this. I hope it will serve as a reminder today and throughout the year of that potential that is rooted in keeping faith with one another, in keeping faith in our ability to care for one another through presence and love and care, and our faith that work still matters. Most weeks when we do our joys and sorrows, we place a pebble into our water. And when we do so, I say that it represents the way that this congregation holds all of us and all of each of us in love and care. Symbols like water and stones can be powerful. They can be reminders of something that we already know. But so too can the physical things themselves, the water and the stones. Just as a connection to trusted neighbors or loved ones can help us remain calm in the face of challenges, so too can a physical connection to somebody else or to the earth. Some people take off their shoes to stand in the grass. Others like to enter the forest and listen to the sounds of nature. And today I want to offer you something that you can grasp onto when things get tough. You may have noticed that there are stones in our communal water this morning. In a moment, Janique and Alex will bless us with an anthem, and as they do, I'm going to dry off these pebbles, and Christine and I are going to bring them around and offer one to everyone here. If you'd like one, just hold out your hands and we'll give it to you. If you don't, you can leave your hands in your lap. And if you're online and would like a stone delivered to you, please enter your address into the chat. And we'll also keep some stones here on the welcome table for anybody to come pick up the next time you're in the building, if that's your preference. And so as I close, I want to invite us all together into the spirit of prayer or contemplation to bless our water and bless our stones and bless one another. I'll now share the words written by Eileen Workman. To you, the tender ones, the ones who still believe in love even when the world calls that foolish, the ones who feel too much, too deeply, and wonder if that's a flaw, the ones who keep soft hearts in sharp-edged times. I see you, I feel you, and I want you to know you are not alone. You are not weak for trembling in the face of cruelty. You are not naive for hoping when the sky darkens. You are not failing because you cannot fix it all. You are part of something ancient and emergent, a slow, deep evolution of consciousness that transcends the need for violent revolution. You are a part of the sacred turning. While others clamor for dominance, you are learning to listen. While others double down on control, you are opening to communion. While others seek safety through separation, you are remembering the truth of our interbeing. This path is not glamorous. It is not televised. It is not rewarded by systems we are here to outgrow. It is internal, subtle, relational, often invisible, and yet it is real. Every time you choose presence over projection, curiosity over judgment, compassion over vengeance, you are participating in the only revolution that has ever actually worked. The one that begins inside the human heart. Let the old world rage. Let it rattle. Let it cling to its illusions of power. That is what dying paradigms do. But you You are part of the living future. You are helping it take shape breath by breath, soul by soul. And I know it's exhausting to feel it all, to journey in truth without armor, to hold space for healing while so many still choose harm. But you are not here to fight harder. You are here to become freer. You are not here to conquer the old world, but to no longer be ruled by it. You are not here to silence the oppressor, but to make oppression obsolete through the gentle, radical embodiment of wholeness. So stay close to your knowing. Tend it like a sacred fire. Gather with others who can feel, hear, and remember the same music that you can hear beneath the noise. And when life feels too heavy to hold, remember too, you are not doing this alone. You never were. Amen. The words of Eileen Work.